So I want you to picture stepping off a heaving supply boat um, onto this freezing, jagged rock right in the middle of the North Atlantic.
Oh, that sounds miserable already.
Right, it gets worse. You climb these steep, sea-slicked stone stairs up to a lighthouse. And this place is meant to be manned by three hardened
Yeah,
professionals.
these are not amateurs.
Exactly. So you get to the top, and the heavy iron door is closed, but it's unlocked. You step inside, and their dinner is just sitting on the kitchen table, like partially eaten,
Just abandoned.
completely abandoned. The massive stone tower is totally empty. So, welcome to the deep dive. If you are someone who loves a genuine, unsolvable puzzle, you're in the right place today.
You really are.
We are immersing ourselves in some incredibly haunting source material today. It's excerpts from a piece called The Vanishing at Eilean Moor.
It's a fantastic read.
It is. And our mission today is to investigate what might honestly be the ultimate locked room mystery.
Oh, absolutely.
We're traveling back to December of 1900 to this brutally remote Scottish island to look at the chilling, just complete disappearance of three highly experienced lighthouse keepers.
Like they just vanished into thin air.
Exactly. We are going to sift through the physical evidence, the psychological clues they left behind, and of course the local folklore to try and understand what actually happened on that rock.
It's a genuinely unsettling case. But establishing the stakes early on here is crucial
Yeah, for sure.
because this isn't just some ghost story to tell around a campfire. It's actually a phenomenal case study in human psychology.
How do you mean?
Well, it forces us to look at how human beings process the unknown, right? Like how our minds physically react when we're confronted with a total void of information.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And it also shows how historical facts inevitably get distorted and twisted over time, especially when there's no neat and tidy resolution.
Right, when people just need an answer. But to really grasp the gravity of this, you have to feel the setting. I mean, the setting is the entire catalyst here.
Oh, 100%. The environment is basically a character in the story.
Yeah, exactly. So the Flannan Isles are located way off the rugged coast of Scotland. Just picture these jagged black cliffs thrusting violently out of the freezing Atlantic Ocean.
It's just so bleak.
It is one of the loneliest, most hostile environments on Earth. And sitting on the largest of these islands, Eilean Moor, is this massive feat of Victorian engineering, the lighthouse itself.
Right.
I was reading through the source material, and the only analogy that kept coming to mind was that, being stationed there in 1900 must have been exactly like being an astronaut on a space station.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to look at it. The space station analogy perfectly captures the terrifying fragility of their situation.
Yeah, because you're totally cut off.
Exactly. You have an entirely lethal environment right outside the door, and you have absolute reliance on your life support systems.
Which in this case would be.
Right. The thick stone walls, the heat from the hearth, the oil for the lamps, and you have this utter, profound separation from the rest of humanity.
You really do.
If something goes wrong, no one is coming to save you.
No one. You are suspended in this incredibly dangerous environment, just beneath endless storms, surrounded by crushing silence.
Just you and the elements.
And you are relying entirely on strict protocols and the two other guys in the room with you just to survive.
And we should remember, these three keepers weren't just guys off the street.
No, not at all. They were seasoned, experienced professionals. They were thoroughly trained to handle the brutal, mind-numbing conditions of a Scottish winter.
Which is exactly what makes the fact that they completely vanished without a trace so incredibly baffling.
It makes no sense.
No, it doesn't, because that premise centers entirely on unyielding isolation. The actual story of their disappearance only begins when that isolation is finally broken.
Right.
A mystery like this doesn't even exist until the outside world finally pierces that bubble and realizes, hey, there's a void where three men used to be.
Yeah, so let's track the timeline of how that bubble burst. It's December 15th, 1900. Passing ships report a detail that would make any sailor's blood run cold. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse is dark.
Oh, man, that is bad.
You don't need to be a maritime expert to know that a lighthouse going dark is a catastrophic red alert emergency.
It's the one thing that cannot happen.
Exactly. That light exists for one single purpose, to stop ships from smashing into those jagged black cliffs and sinking.
Right, and a dark light means the core mechanism of their survival has failed. Something has gone fundamentally, structurally wrong.
Because it's not automated, right?
Exactly. The lighthouse isn't just a bulb you switch on. It required constant manual maintenance. For the light to go out, it meant the men were either dead, incapacitated, or completely absent.
And they couldn't even go check on them right away.
No, because the Atlantic weather was so incredibly severe, an investigation was physically impossible for days. Nobody could get a ship near the island without risking being dashed against the rocks themselves.
So they just had to wait. Finally, on December 26th, 11 days after the light was first reported dark, the weather breaks just enough.
11 days. Just imagine that.
11 days of darkness. So the supply ship, the Hesperus, arrives carrying the relief lighthouse keeper, a man named Joseph Moore.
Poor guy.
Yeah, the scene when they pull up is just pure, suffocating dread. As the ship approaches Eileen Moore, the crew immediately senses something is deeply wrong.
I bet.
There is this eerie, terrifying silence at the landing dock. Nobody is waiting to greet them.
And that silence was an immediate, glaring violation of protocol.
How so?
Well, standard practice dictated that at least one keeper would always be down at the dock to receive a relief vessel. To catch the heavy mooring lines, welcome the arriving crew, that sort of thing.
But there was no one.
Right. Moore stepped off the boat onto a completely empty dock.
So he climbs those steep stone steps up the cliffs completely alone. The wind is howling. The Atlantic waves are thrashing the rocks below.
It's like something out of a horror movie.
It really is. He reaches the lighthouse. The main door is closed, but the deadbolts aren't thrown. It's unlocked.
Which is weird in itself during a storm.
Super weird. He pushes it open, and the atmosphere inside is just entirely wrong. It's freezing cold.
Because the fires have been out for days.
Exactly. It's completely still. And the domestic details he finds inside are just deeply unsettling.
This is the part that always gets me.
Yeah, there's an overturned chair in the kitchen. Meals on the table look like they have been partially prepared, maybe even partially eaten, and just abandoned.
What's fascinating here is that these domestic details, the partially prepped food, the violently tipped over chair, they paint a very specific, undeniable picture.
Right.
They point directly to a sudden, unexpected interruption of their daily routine. This wasn't a calm, planned departure to perform routine maintenance.
Not at all.
Something caused highly disciplined men to drop what they were doing mid-bite, knock over a chair in their haste, and leave the safety of the tower.
Okay, let's unpack this, because there is one detail inside the lighthouse that absolutely stops me in my tracks.
The clock.
Yes, the clocks. The source material specifically notes that the clocks inside the lighthouse had completely stopped ticking.
Such a haunting detail.
It is. If this was just some sudden accident that happened outside on the cliffs, say they ran out to grab a loose tool, why would the clocks inside have completely stopped?
Well, mechanical clocks of that era are a phenomenal time capsule of evidence.
How do you mean?
They required regular, manual, daily winding to keep the pendulum swinging and the gears moving.
Oh, okay.
So the fact that they had stopped ticking tells us a great deal about the timeline. A fully wound clock from that era might run for maybe 24 to 48 hours.
So if they were dead when Moore arrived on the 26th?
Exactly. It proves the keepers hadn't just stepped out for a moment that morning. It proves a total breakdown of their meticulously maintained routine days earlier.
Wow.
It perfectly aligns with the passing ship seeing a dark light on the 15th.
But the inside of the lighthouse itself was pristine. I mean, aside from the tip chair, there was no sign of a struggle, no blood, nothing broken.
Right.
Whatever terrifying event interrupted their dinner, it didn't happen in the kitchen. It had to be something outside that drew them out into the cold.
And when searchers scoured the rocky cliffs outside, they found their answer in the form of massive, incomprehensible storm damage on the western side of the island.
The scale of this destruction was just staggering.
It was unreal.
Heavy equipment had been completely torn from secured storage areas that were located, get this, over 100 feet above sea level.
Think about the sheer physics of that. We are talking about thick, solid iron railings, violently bent and twisted.
Heavy wooden supply boxes just smashed to splinters.
Yeah.
Thick mooring ropes just completely mangled.
The sheer overwhelming force of water required to reach that high up a cliff face and bend iron is terrifying to even imagine.
It's almost impossible.
It implies weather conditions of apocalyptic proportions localized entirely to that side of the island. And this discovery leads directly to the most crucial piece of physical evidence regarding the men themselves.
The oilskins.
Exactly. These were the heavy, stiff, thoroughly waterproof coats the keepers wore to survive the freezing sea spray and rain.
You'd die without them out there.
Pretty much. Joseph Moore checked the coat pegs and found that 2 sets of oilskins were missing. But one set remained hanging perfectly inside the lighthouse.
See, this detail is the linchpin of the whole mystery for me. because the strict, unbreakable protocol of the Northern Lighthouse Board dictated that one man must always remain inside to maintain the light.
Always. No exceptions.
Under no circumstances do you ever leave the lighthouse empty.
And the untouched oilskin heavily implies that one keeper was, initially at least, following protocol.
Right.
He stayed indoors while the other two went out into the storm, presumably to secure the heavy equipment that was being battered by the waves.
But of course, the harsh reality is that all three men vanished.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, I have to push back on the official theory here.
Okay, let's hear it.
The standard explanation usually floated is that a sudden, massive wave swept the two men away while they were out doing repairs, and the third man ran out to save them and was also swept away.
Right. That's the common narrative.
But if the weather outside was violent enough to twist heavy ropes and bend solid iron 100 feet above the sea, why on earth would a highly experienced professional...
A guy who knows exactly how lethal the Atlantic is.
Exactly. Why would he run out into a freezing storm without his protective oilskin coat? It makes absolutely no sense.
You are zeroing in on the central behavioral contradiction of the entire case. These were not reckless, impulsive men.
No, they were veterans.
Highly trained veterans of a grueling service, breaking the absolute golden rule of manning the light and stepping into a deadly freezing storm without survival gear, suggests a complete collapse of rational thought.
So what does it point to?
It points to either extreme, blind panic, a desperate emergency where literal seconds mattered, or something entirely irrational driving that third man out the door.
Because the physical evidence gives us these impossible contradictions, right? Like leaving a warm lighthouse without a coat into a storm that can bend iron. We can't just look at the physical scene anymore.
We have to pivot.
We really do. We have to look at the psychological state of the men. And the only window we have into their minds is the single written record they left behind.
The official lighthouse logbook.
The logbook entries are where the atmosphere of this case sharply shifts from a tragic maritime accident to something much darker.
Oh, absolutely.
The entries written in the days leading up to December 15th describe severe, punishing winds. But the language used isn't standard meteorological shorthand.
No, it's very emotional.
It describes winds unlike anything these veteran keepers had ever experienced in their long careers.
And it gets so much more intense than just extreme weather.
Right.
One entry allegedly describes one of the men, a tough, hardened professional who has lived through countless brutal Atlantic winters, crying continuously.
Think about the psychological mechanics of that. What kind of environmental pressure breaks a veteran keeper down to continuous tears?
We have to consider the effects of severe sensory deprivation combined with extreme stress.
It must have been unbearable.
Trapped in a stone cylinder, the constant deafening roar of a hurricane-force wind acts like a relentless physical weight.
Just pounding on you.
It deprives you of sleep, it frees the nervous system, and it isolates you within your own mind. But the logbook also introduces a massive, glaring paradox into the timeline.
Right. The logbook reports these terrifying apocalyptic storms raging for days leading up to the 15th.
Yeah.
But official weather records from the mainland and logs from surrounding ships in the area showed absolutely no major storm systems reaching the Flannan Isles during those specific days.
It's just wild.
The weather in the broader region was recorded as relatively calm.
So were they experiencing a localized freak weather anomaly that miraculously missed every other ship and weather station? Or, far more terrifyingly, were they perceiving a violent storm that simply wasn't there?
That gives me chills. And then you have the final haunting logbook entry. It supposedly read, "Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all."
Wow.
And then, nothing. The ink stops. No more signs of life.
It reads almost like an epitaph.
Yeah.
But we absolutely must introduce a crucial layer of historical context here.
Definitely.
Over the decades, modern historians have heavily scrutinized those specific, dramatic logbook entries. There's significant, well-founded debate about whether those terrifying details, the crying man, the phantom storm, that highly poetic final sentence, whether they were entirely authentic.
Because of the era. What?
Exactly. In the early 1900s, yellow journalism was rampant. Newspapers often exaggerated or entirely fictionalized details to sell broadsheets to a public hungry for sensation.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because it's exactly like a historical game of telephone.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
You start with a genuinely weird, unexplained event. 3 men disappear, their coats are left behind. But a missing coat is a dry fact.
It doesn't sell papers.
Right. So as the story gets told and retold by journalists over decades, a standard weather note gets morphed into this gothic tale of madness, phantom storms, and weeping men.
It snowballs.
It shows how easily a mundane detail can mutate into a myth when people are desperate for a cohesive, dramatic narrative.
And this raises an important question about the reliability of the evidence itself.
Yeah, how much can we trust it?
When folklore and journalistic embellishment begin to blend so seamlessly with historical fact, how can we possibly separate the truth from the legend?
It's almost impossible now.
If we accept that the logbook might be partially fabricated or sensationalized, we are forced back to the terrifying core of the mystery, the raw psychological toll of the environment.
Just the sheer isolation.
Imagine 3 men listening to the wind scream for weeks on end. It is a breeding ground for isolation-induced paranoia.
So having laid out the physical clues, the missing coats, the bent iron, and having unpacked the highly dubious psychological records in the logbook, we have to synthesize these elements.
We have to look at the big picture.
We have to deeply evaluate the 3 prevailing theories of what actually happened.
The first category is the rational or official explanation, the rogue wave.
Which honestly sounds terrifying enough on its own.
Oh, totally. To understand this, we have to look at the physics of the ocean. Rogue waves are not myths. They are phenomena caused by constructive interference, where different ocean swells intersect and combine their energy, suddenly creating a massive wall of water that can reach nearly 100 feet high in otherwise calm seas.
So it just comes out of nowhere.
Exactly. The theory posits that 2 men were outside securing equipment when a rogue wave struck. The third man, watching from the window, saw the water rising, panicked, and rushed out to warn them, completely neglecting his coat and the protocol in his terror. All 3 were subsequently swept away.
It makes a kind of grim logistical sense. It explains the bent iron and the missing coat, but then you have the darker theories.
Yeah, the ones that are a bit more unsettling.
The ideas centering on murder or madness, the theory that the isolation finally cracked one of them, that the sensory deprivation and paranoia led to a violent psychotic break, resulting in a murder-suicide where the survivor threw himself into the sea.
Dark thought.
But the source material is clear here. The physical scene actively contradicts this. If a man loses his mind and attacks his crewmates, there is chaos.
Right, there'd be signs of a struggle.
But there was absolutely no blood, no signs of a violent struggle. The kitchen was just a normal meal, interrupted.
And the lack of physical evidence for madness or violence leaves a massive void. And human beings instinctively rush to fill that void with the third category.
The supernatural.
Yes. The Flannan Isles were steeped in dark folklore centuries before the lighthouse was ever constructed. For generations, local Scottish fishermen absolutely refused to go near the islands after dark.
The local legends talked about strange spirits living in the cliffs, unseen ancient presences wandering the rocks. Some locals fully believe the construction of the lighthouse woke up something inhuman that had been resting there.
Which brings us back to Joseph Moore.
Oh, right. You really can't examine the supernatural angle without looking at Moore, the relief keeper who first unlocked that door.
Moore's own testimony adds a deeply chilling postscript to the initial discovery.
What did he say?
He later admitted that the moment he stepped into that cold, silent lighthouse, he felt an overwhelming, oppressive sensation that he was being watched.
Like, watched by the missing men.
No, that's the thing. He didn't say he felt the presence of his missing friends. He explicitly noted feeling that something else was watching him.
Oh, wow.
As if the rock itself was fully aware of what had happened to the men.
So what does this all mean? I want you, listening right now, to put yourself on that island. Which scenario is actually scarier to you?
It's a tough choice.
Is it facing down some ancient supernatural presence emerging from the dark Atlantic water? Or is it sitting at that kitchen table looking at your 2 friends and having the sudden, terrifying realization that your own mind is fracturing from the loneliness?
Both are a nightmare.
That your brain is inventing storms and your grip on reality is just slipping away into the silence.
Both scenarios are deeply horrifying because they both represent an absolute, total loss of control.
Yeah, you're just powerless.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Flannan Isles Mystery perfectly illustrates the mechanics of human nature. We absolutely abhor a void of information.
We just can't stand not knowing.
When confronted with an unsolvable puzzle, 3 men gone, no bodies ever recovered, no confirmed explanation, our brains instinctively try to impose order on the chaos.
Right.
We either reach for rational science and the physics of wave interference to explain away the terror, or we reach for supernatural myths, creating monsters to explain the unexplainable.
Because anything, even a monster, is better than just accepting the terrifying, indifferent randomness of nature.
Exactly.
Today, the Isle Lighthouse is still standing, but it is completely automated, it is empty, there are no keepers, there hasn't been a human living there in decades.
Just an empty shell.
There is just the stone structure, the crashing waves, the wind, and the exact same silence that was left behind over a century ago. It forces us to confront this deeply uncomfortable truth.
Such as?
That despite all our strict protocols, our advanced engineering, and our rigid logic, nature ultimately holds all the power. And it absolutely does not owe us an explanation.
The ocean is remarkably, terrifyingly indifferent to our human need for closure.
And that leads to a thought I just can't shake, especially when looking at this case through a modern lens.
What's that?
We live in this hyper-connected world today. We assume that everything we do is tracked, recorded, and safely backed up in the cloud. We feel secure because we leave this massive digital footprint everywhere we go, creating an illusion of permanence.
We do feel very permanent now.
But the ocean is the ultimate erasure. If an environment like Isle Moor could so perfectly and cleanly wipe away 3 human lives, their entire reality, and all definitive truth over a century ago, it really makes you wonder. If a truly massive, localized natural event struck today, violently wiping out the servers, the cell towers, and the power grids, would our modern digital logbooks really be any more capable of telling the true story of what happened to us?
That is a scary thought.
Or would we, just like those 3 keepers, leave behind nothing but a different kind of silence?
It is a sobering thought. We wrap ourselves in the comfort of modern technology, convincing ourselves we've mastered our environment. But against the raw, erasing power of the natural world, our data is just as fragile as ink on paper.
It brings us right back to that space station analogy. You can build the thickest stone walls, you can write the strictest rule books, but when you are out there on the edge, separated from the rest of humanity by an endless, hostile void, sometimes the void just wins.
Yeah.
And all the clocks simply stop.